welcome to the Lowdown Mortgage Podcast, the show where we dive deep into the topics that directly impact the evolving originator. I'm your host, Connor Bartley. Bam! And joining me today is someone who brings a calm, steady approach to a business that often feels anything but calm. She's built a career around consistency, technical expertise, and showing up for her clients through all seasons of the market. She's the kind of person that you really want in your corner. Cara Erickson, welcome to the Lowdown.
Connor, I'm
Cara,
happy to be here.
fantastic. Well, I'm really excited for you to be on this and to have this conversation. I've been looking forward to it since we got a chance to kind of meet and prep for this because you got a great story. And so I kind of want to start with a little bit of your background because before you got into mortgage lending, you spent some time as a school teacher. And, when we talked, you shared that experience kind of shaped the way you see things in a way. And so I'm just curious, like, what did teaching train you to notice about people that still shows up in the way you guide clients through a big financial decision like getting a mortgage?
Yeah, so I went to school to be a school teacher. I taught elementary school and found my way into the mortgage world. And one of the things I think that really helped with the transition into mortgage lending is from teaching is the gift of patience and the gift of knowing how to ask open-ended questions to be able to really gauge if somebody is understanding. One of the things with teachers is that we can teach them pretty complex topics, and some kids get it right away. Some kids get it after the second try. Some kids, it takes them a little bit longer. And so being able to recognize that not everybody is going to understand mortgage loan financing, house hunting, PITI, like they're not going to understand all of that sometimes the first time around. Being able to really break things down into a very, elementary level, like very basic. That way they understand, they don't feel like they're being talked over. They're like, okay, no, this makes a lot of sense. So really just the patience of, breaking it down, knowing how to explain it, knowing kind of, what questions are going to come up as a result of maybe first time buying a home. It's been a long time since they bought a home. They've never had to finance a home. And then knowing how to ask those questions so that way you can get the information out of them and you can really gauge, like, do you understand this? Do you need some more clarification on things? And then, being able to wrap up the conversation that way.
Yeah, I think that's a huge call out that I want to make. Last year, I read a book called Go for Stupid by Steve Sims, and in it, there's a part that says, "Ask better questions, get better answers." And I think it's easy, the more you do the same job over and over again and kind of go through the motions with clients to kind of get in a groove of, asking the same basic questions, but to get better information and to extract more and maybe even to educate on a higher level, having those better questions really does kind of change the conversation and can uncover some problems that maybe you would run into later on that earlier in the process just by asking the right questions. So you also shared that the way that you grew up kind of shaped your values around responsibility and stability and how did those early influences kind of show up in the way you approach your career today?
Yeah. So I was raised by a single mom who went to school full time and worked full time. And so, watching my mom really just go for it. I mean, she just went for the gold. And I really learned from her the importance of the tenacity and just really striving for it. And then when I was a little bit older, she married my dad, and he was in the military. He was Special Forces, Navy for 27 years. And so she went from being a single mom of me to being a military spouse with 3 kids while he was deployed. So we joke that she went from a single mom to a single mom, a married single mom. And so while she was building these businesses, I helped take care of my younger brother and sister. I would make sure that they had help with homework, that they got home okay after school. Since I was the oldest, I would typically be home before them, making sure that lunches were packed, laundry was done. I've been doing laundry since I was in elementary school to help take that off of my parents. And so, I remember when my parents bought their first house, I was 10 years old. And I remember just seeing the relief in my parents' face that they no longer had to answer to a landlord. The house that they lived in previously was falling apart. The landlord refused to fix anything. And so the fact that they now owned something that was their own that my dad could deploy, we had a safe place to live, it was theirs. And that really just drilled in me the not just the power of homeownership in the sense of the financial aspect of it, but the security of it, the security that home ownership gives people. And now today I get to be a part of helping people find that security through buying, selling real estate.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Great story. You earlier even mentioned like you're very intentional about how you guide clients through the loan process. So, what part of your process do you think really helps clients feel the most confident and informed?
So I do a really dialed in initial call. So before I even really let somebody do a loan app with me, I'm having them on the phone for 10 minutes. First and foremost, I want them to know I'm a real person. I don't work in a call center. I'm a real person. I'm very invested in this community. I'm very invested in my clients' financial goals. Really wanting to know where are they at so I can meet them there. If you're a first time home buyer, let's talk about it. If you were denied for a loan last year, let's talk about it. If you are a move up buyer, let's talk about it. If you're retiring and downsizing, let's talk about it, because it goes back to the listening and the asking of the open ended questions. If I can do a quick 10-minute call and really dig deep on what these potential home buyers are looking for, it gives me more power to be able to create a budget for them and get their loan pre-approved so that it's truly meeting what their needs are. Over the years, one of the biggest complaints that I hear is that it's, well, I feel like I'm not heard, or I asked for this, but I got this and I don't understand why. So again, asking the open-ended questions, really taking some good notes, and then going over the why. The why behind the what is what I like to say, and that way they can understand. They understand the whole approach to the home loan pre-approval versus just, oh, this is what you're pre-approved for, happy house shopping.
Yeah. So, how often do you revisit that conversation in a typical loan process? I mean, is that something that you have to keep coming back to, or is it sort of like a one and done, like, let me remind you, and then they're like, you're right, we're good, let's move on?
I mean, sometimes we revisit the question, but then when I do a budget review after they've done the loan application, I've done the budget, or it's time to do the budget review. I'm doing a follow up 30 to 45-minute call to actually go through their entire file. I mean, I'm telling them their credit score, I'm reviewing their credit history, I'm reminding them of the goals that they gave me and how I came up with the numbers. You said you want this payment, but you want this price point. How did you come up with those numbers? This is what I'm seeing on my side. Are there any changes that maybe weren't listed in here? I'm really doing a super, super deep dive so that, again, I'm putting this financing together for them that meets their needs based off of, what it is that they're telling me. So sometimes I have to go and I reiterate, but typically once we're doing the budget review call, I'm able to say, in our initial call, you had mentioned this, so that's why I did this. And then it just kind of helps things flow.
Yeah. Now, I think people listening up to this point would probably be surprised to know that you kind of described yourself as not really being a salesperson, that you're more of a technical person. And I don't believe it. You're very you communicate very well. You're very outspoken, but you lead with accuracy, like preparation and clarity. When did you realize that leaning into your technical strengths could actually become your sales advantage?
Yeah, so I am so not salesy. Like, I love to go home and read books and be by myself. Like, I am the ultimate introvert. But, I've always, especially in this business, shiny object syndrome, I've always been jealous of the people who have the marketing brains and they come up with these amazing, like, marketing presentations and social media posts. And I love it. And I tried, and it is just not me. So I said, okay, I need to stop trying to be somebody else and lean into the fact that I'm very good. I'm a good technician. I can really do a great job of figuring out loans. And so I find partners who appreciate a loan officer who's really good at tackling loans. And so that's kind of where I've built my business around, is just, agents and other, referral partners who kind of need, like, they're great at marketing, but they need somebody on the technical side to help them. So we just make a really good match.
Yeah, well, it's great that you're finding like those complementary parts. I think that's a big call out for any loan officer trying to build their business. Like, know who you are and be clear about that to your referral partners and to your clients and just anybody you're working with, so that they don't have an expectation of you to be someone different. And then you can fill the gaps for each other in that partnership and really find a way to work together really well. So I think I'm glad that you're leaning into that. A lot of others might just decide to try and force it, and it would feel forced.
I did
So
try to force the marketing thing, and I will tell you that I could never understand why my marketing like always fell flat. And I'm like, because I'm not a marketer. Like my marketing was technical stuff, and people don't want to see technical stuff on, on social media. It's just not interesting.
yeah, yeah, it's hard for sure. I saw, it's funny that you bring that up. So I saw something the other day. It was a slide, it was a picture of someone, a social media expert, and teaching a class, and it had their slide up on the screen, and it was like AI prompts to use, and it was, say it in a way that will piss people off, say it in a way that'll get under their skin, and like sometimes we just don't have that in us naturally, right? And so like marketing has gotten so, I don't know, not my style at least. So earlier you were talking about just being clear and communicating with your clients, which, let's face it, in like a mortgage setting there's a lot of information. So how do you manage that conversation in a way that it doesn't feel overwhelming to that client?
I believe in the power of laying out expectations. So when I do my initial discovery call, I let them know who I am and the purpose of the call. And then at the end of that, I'll let them know, okay, here are the next steps. So I pretty much any call that I have, especially if it's a deep dive call, if it's just a call to just give a quick update, like, hey, just need 30 seconds of your time. But if it's like a budget review call or a discovery call, I'm setting the expectations up front. This is what you can expect. This is what we're going to touch on. This is what I'm going to talk to you about. Are there any questions or thoughts that you particularly want me to touch on before I get going? And then I always end a call with a next steps. So that way there's some sort of call to action so that they know, okay, this is what I need to do next. And if I don't hear from you in the next day or two, I'll follow up with you and just make sure any questions that popped up are answered for you.
And so I know you've built like a process and some habits and routines to help you stay consistent and be sort of market proof, so to speak, where if things shift, you've got a plan in place. So, like, what does consistency look like for you on a practical level from a day to day?
So I'm going to start backwards. So on Fridays, I take about an hour before I head out for the day and I look at my wins. I look at what I accomplished. I look at where I fell short. I like to get a recap from my team to find out from them where they struggled, something they learned, and something that they found that they really liked and enjoy doing. And then thinking ahead, I spend part of that time looking at my following week, seeing what I already have kind of scheduled out, and then building in time blocks. And so that way I know I'm big into theme days. I've been big into theme days since probably after COVID, just to take more control over my business. And it's not a simple, every Monday is, these are who I'm calling. Every Tuesday is this. Every Wednesday, it changes depending on what I've got going on. And so, but again, looking ahead, I will look to see what I have in the upcoming week. And then I'll map out my power hours accordingly. And I will put in my Outlook calendar invite to myself, I guess, with who it is that I'm calling and what my topic of conversation is. So that way I know who is it that I'm talking to? What do I need to talk about? Is it an event? Is it a new product? Is it just a checking in because we haven't talked in a few weeks? Doing a recap of leads that have been referred over to me. We've got some deals under contract. Let's talk those through, where we at, what's going on, how's the inspections. And then same thing with, identifying clients that I need to reach out to, whether it's, a 6-month touch point, an annual touch point, active shoppers, just to kind of see where they're at, again, just really making sure I have my target list ahead of time, because you and I both know that, especially as a technician, I don't necessarily want to be on the phone. So if I can talk myself out of getting on the phone 100 times out of 100 times, will. And so if I have my list ahead of time and I have my conversation, it I have no choice to go ahead and knock it out. So that's how I stay consistent, and that's how I can, force myself to show up every day for myself, but then also, my team knows
Yeah.
now too, like this is what, Cara is doing on any given day. So they can know, okay, do I need to bother her at this time? Unless it's an emergency, I'm going to wait until this time, so that way they also can, kind of schedule out their days accordingly too.
Well, a few things I love about that. One, I love that you finish your week with kind of like a highlight and low light reel, and that you're really like kind of going through, because a lot of times we can focus just on one or the other, right? And only look at the good things that happened, or maybe just get really down on ourselves because it was a bad week. But there's always, there's within any given week, it can't all be one or the other, right? Like there's always a good mix in there. And so to kind of digest all of that, and I'm curious, this is just something that I thought of while you were sharing that. Do you ever like journal your days, or do you keep like a log of any of that information?
I do.
You do. Okay, cool. Well,
I
I think
do.
that's a really cool practice. I've often thought I should, and so I ask because I want to know what people who are successful are doing, and maybe I should do the same things.
I do like a
But
daily reflection. Yeah, I do like a
yeah, yeah,
daily
yeah.
reflection at the end of the day so I can know, where I fell short. If there was something that was really bothering me, I'll write about it so that way I can, you know, go back to it the next day and see, okay, was this really an issue or was it more of a non-issue and I was just, really feeling it at the moment. And then in the mornings I do affirmations and gratitudes and then I kind of do a look back on my day before and then I map out my, these are my top priorities and things like that.
How long does that take?
In the evenings, I mean, I could take hours doing that. I don't,
Yeah.
but I could because I just believe in the power of journaling. I try to take like maybe 30 minutes, as
Okay.
I'm kind of cleaning out my inbox and, doing it at the same time. In the mornings, it's part of my morning routine. So I have an hour from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. before the dogs and the kids and, everybody's up and moving where part of my morning routine is affirmations, gratitude, what do I hope for the day? What's my intention for the day? Kind of getting my mindset right.
Is that something you've always done, or is that something that just sort of started recently or within the last couple of years?
I've done that since 2021.
Okay, that's awesome.
And it helps with getting your, this can be a really stressful business. And I think that a lot of us forget that we have to protect our mental health. We are so focused on putting our clients and our partners first that we have to, sometimes keep in mind that we also need to make sure that we are putting ourselves first before we start putting others first.
Yeah.
And so really, it helps with just clarity. And again, I have a whole routine in the morning. So when I come into the office, I'm ready to start my day. Like I've gotten whatever was bothering me on paper. I've got my day mapped out. I'm coming in with a grateful heart. And then I can, I'm just in a much better headspace. My girls can always tell when I come in and I haven't done it because they're like, ooh, are the kids okay this morning?
Yeah, no carrot time this morning, huh?
Yeah. I'll come in, I'll close my door and they know, like, okay, give her 30 minutes to decompress.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's wonderful that you do that. And I like how you map out your week and that the team is included and like they know what's going on. I think that's great. Now, you mentioned kind of earlier in your career that you felt a little more reactive sometimes versus proactive. What helped you like recognize that? And then what did you do to change that?
Yeah. So I've been doing this for 15 years. For the first half of my business, I was very reactive. Truthfully, having my son put a lot of things into perspective for me because I realized that I couldn't just live life by the hour. Like, oh, no worries. I'll catch up on emails at 10 o'clock tonight. And, like, I don't have to wake up until 7. I couldn't do that anymore if I wanted to be a present mom. And so after my son was born, it took me a little while to kind of get into that frame of mind because, I'm a grinder. I'm a hustler. Like I always have been. And some things happened and I really realized like it kind of hit me that Hudson's got one mom, and I need to make sure I'm showing up for him before all others. That realization is what made me more proactive. If I can get ahead of issues, I have more time to spend with my child. So how did I do that? It was paying attention to people's questions, going back to the listening. When I found that the same questions kept getting asked, it was, okay, what am I doing that is making somebody ask these questions? Why is this not being addressed? This is something that should have already been handled. So every time I got asked a question more than once, it was a cue for me to change that part of my process to make sure that it was addressed. So that way it wasn't coming back. So every time that, even still, every time that that happens, I'm, adding it to my list. Okay, make sure we're asking this, make sure we're looking at this, make sure we're reviewing this. So we're constantly updating how we do things based off of the, unintentional feedback that we're getting by way of the questions. The power hours help with that. So that way I can get ahead of things, through these calls. But then also, I meet with my girls pretty much every day for a quick 15-minute huddle. So that way we know, like, okay, this is what happened yesterday. This is what's happening today. This is, coming in the near future. And then again, we all break and we know exactly what it is that we're all taking part of. So it's just, kind of seeing where those speed bumps are throughout the process and then getting a process to get ahead of that.
Yeah, well, and I love that. It's something that the more I've done these podcasts and the more top producers that I've talked to, something that becomes very clear is that there is a moment where, and it seems like it would be the opposite, but when the originator starts to place boundaries on their business and separate personal and business and say, I'm not taking calls after 5 or 7 or whatever it is for you, but when they start to kind of set those boundaries, their business actually goes up because they're not running themselves ragged all day long and just reacting to the next thing, and they force themselves into like this structure so that they can get those things done within those boundaries and it can be finished instead of just saying, I'll do anything anytime, I'm always available, right? And it's like, no, I'm efficient between these hours, so that's when I'm available. And so I think that's great. Now we're kind of getting here towards the end, so just want to ask you, because Cara, you've built an impressive business. You're doing some great things for your community, and I think any loan officer that's listening to this could, learn a thing or two from you. And I'm just curious, like, what do you feel is the best advice for someone who is in the middle of kind of trying to build, maybe feeling a little stuck in their growth? Like, what is one or two things that they should do next to start speeding up that process and get over the hump?
So one of the things that I did was I put together a mock calendar for like what it would look like if I were a busy loan officer. So I intentionally filled that up, like with appointments and, things like that, the power hours, that sort of thing. Because I said, if, such and such person's calendar looks like this and mine is bare bones, like there's a reason, like, so I started kind of tricking my brain into thinking that I was a busy loan officer. And then I kind of, morphed into it. But also, I think what would I tell myself 15 years ago if I could go back in time and I could see myself when I first got in the industry? And I would tell myself to not be afraid to go for the ask, because there are going to be plenty of people who don't want to work with you, but that it's not anything personal. There are plenty of people who want to work with you and who think that you're great. And to remember that those are the people that you want to surround yourself with, and to not compare yourself to others, because everybody is at their own kind of chapter within their own books. And it's easy to compare where you're at if you're not happy with it to somebody else and wishing that you were there. And really, we're all doing great things. We're all just doing our best and we're all trying to show up in the best way that we can. And to just give yourself more credit, because I mean, you're great. Like you're awesome. Just go out there, do it, put that smile on your face, make the dials, get the no's, because it's honestly, it's going to tear down your confidence and it's absolutely going to suck. But then when you start getting the yeses and you start hearing people talk about you and the reputation that you're getting because you just do such a great job, it's all worth it. Because then you're like, yeah, see, like all you people who told me no, I didn't need you.
You got me
Here I
fired
am.
up now, Cara. I
Yes.
love that. I love the mock calendar. Like, imagine your perfect day and map it out and say, like, okay, if I were a fill in the blank, production loan officer or whatever it is, like whatever your definition of success is. If that were me today, what would I have to do to be that person? What does their day look like? And then, yeah, and then just kind of fill out the calendar and know, okay, these are the things I need to do. And then you start doing them. And
Yes.
that's a great, great
So
way to
that
do it.
came to
I love
me.
that.
It was one of our managers, and he sat me down one day. This was before my son was born. And he sat me down one day and he said, what kind of producer do you want to be? Now, this, mind you, this was like in 16 or like 2015 maybe. And I was like, I want to close $30 million in a year, which now people would, like, okay. I wanted to close $30 million. And he said, okay, what are the hours that you work? And I said, I work from 10 to 2. And he said, so you work 20 hours a week? And I said, yes. And he said, and you want to be one of the top loan officers in the company? And I said, yes. And he said, okay. And that was it.
Okay.
And that was, he wasn't rude. He wasn't, nothing. He was just very like, okay. And it was in that moment where I realized I have to act like a top producing loan officer in order to be a top producing loan officer. I can't leave at 2. I can't, like I have to fill my days with income producing activities. And it was then I started doing these mock calendars where I started filling my days and filling my time and being productive and really focusing on what was driving that needle forward, So now sometimes my calendars are overbooked, but it's a blessing and I will take it because I think
Yeah.
about that and I'm like, and I'm still friends with him, but I'm like, you didn't even know it, but you set something in motion.
Yeah. That one little, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Didn't have to
Well,
say anything else. Just okay.
what I tell my kids is similar to that is, you can either in life, you can either get what you want or take what you get. And so, you can have a very comfortable life and just kind of take what comes to you and things will be fine. But you may not be fulfilled by that. You may not be satisfied with that. And in order to get what you want, it does require some action. It does require doing something to get it. And so I think that was a great practice. And thank you for sharing the story behind it. But Cara, I want to say thank you for being on the lowdown, kind of sharing your story and your insights and wisdom. It was great for anybody who's listening. And I'm just cheering you on from the sidelines here and wish nothing but the best for you.
Thank you so much.